Welcome. This is the second of our Preparing to Reopen webinars this week. I very much hope that we don't have to do another round of these Preparing to Reopen webinars, and that this is in fact the last time we prepare to reopen. So recognising that we are unlikely, I think, to have another government update until I think the 20th, is that right, Gordon?
Correct, correct.
So we all have to behave. We have to do what everyone has said we should do. And if we step out of line, we'll get in trouble towards the end of the month. So let's hope everything goes well. I will say very little else other than to introduce our very good friend, Mr. Gordon Morrison of ASVA, the Association of Scotland's Visitor Attractions. Gordon will give a bit of an outline of what ASVA does. Some of you in the room may not know what ASVA do, or indeed what they've been doing on ours and your behalf all year. There'll be a bit of an update on what's been going on, and then over to you guys for questions. And I suspect there will not be a question that Gordon can't answer.
Wow.
That's a challenge to you, my friend. So without any further nonsense from me, Mr. Gordon Morrison of ASVA.
Thanks very much indeed, Laurie, for that fantastic introduction. I will try and answer as many questions as I can, guys. That's what I'd say. I actually have many questions of the Scottish Government still, as I'm sure you'll be aware. But I'll try my best where I can to answer any questions you have. And I should also say that I'm interested to hear from you as well about your comments, your concerns about reopening, because everything that I get back from any of these webinars that I do, I feed back in to my contacts at the Scottish Government. So yeah, firstly, ASVA. ASVA is the trade body that represents the visitor attraction sector in Scotland. We've got just over 240 organisations and over 480 visitor attractions in membership all across the country. We are the recognised voice of the attraction sector by both the Scottish and the UK governments, and I have regular, at the moment, virtually daily dialogue with the Scottish Government officials and ministers, as well as with other stakeholders such as Visit Scotland and the enterprise agencies about the impact of the pandemic. I should make it clear, we don't get any funding whatsoever as an organisation. We rely entirely on membership subscriptions. Why that's a good thing is it means that we are not beholden to anyone at all but our members. So everything that we do is done to support the attraction sector. We've got no paymasters sitting within the government, within Visit Scotland, anybody else. We exist purely to service the attraction sector. At the moment, I represent the attraction sector on the Scottish Government's Tourism Recovery Task Force. I'm also in the Scottish Tourism Alliance Council, and I feed directly into the Scottish Tourism Emergency Response Group as well. Throughout the crisis, ASVA have been supporting the industry primarily through an extensive lobbying activity. Probably one of our biggest achievements recently has been that we secured the £10 million in funding support for the sector through the Scottish Visitor Attractions Support Fund, which I hope that many people on here will have benefited from. It's what I'd like to emphasise about that is it's worth remembering that before ASVA actually lobbied the Scottish Government about funding, the Scottish Government were only going to be giving 1.5 million to the sector. So we managed to get it up to 10 million. And indeed, the Scottish Government then asked us to play an active role in actually designing the fund to ensure that the support would reach the attractions that would be most in need. And I do firmly believe we managed to achieve that. But of course, this by no means that we've stopped calling for more financial support for the sector. That work very much continues because 2021 is going to be a hard year, as I'm sure you're all aware. I'll talk more about our request for financial support in a few minutes. We've also provided, and indeed we continue to provide, a raft of online resources for the industry as well. As many of you will know, we've hosted more than 30 webinars focused specifically on support actions for the attraction sector throughout the crisis. We've also created advice documents for the safe reopening of the sector as well, including a brand new one that's just been updated today that's available on the website. You can view all our upcoming events. We've got 2 new events taking place in April on the ASVA website. And we've also got a COVID-19 info page. If you haven't been on and checked it out, you'll find a whole range of resources there, all specifically focused on visitor attractions in Scotland. We've also worked with Visit Scotland and the Scottish Government to look at some specific recovery support measures for the sector. We're heavily involved with the putting together the Days Out campaign, which we're hoping to see later this year. If you haven't heard of it, this is a government financed campaign that will encourage and incentivize domestic visitors to get out and visit attractions through the use of a voucher scheme, very similar to what we saw with Eat Out to Help Out scheme last year. Now, what I should say is the election has got in the way a wee bit of that being progressed, because obviously we can't work with ministers just now, but we are certain, 99% certain, that scheme will be launched later on in the year. The idea is probably that it'll be launched more of towards out of season time to try and encourage people to visit attractions not in the main summer season, but that's still to be fleshed out. Before talking a wee bit more about ASVA's latest activity that we're involved in, I wanted to, I think it's important to take a few minutes just to reflect on where we are just now. I always look back at what I was doing a year ago, and obviously it was just over a year ago the sector was given the mandate to close due to the pandemic. I think very few of us would have foreseen that we'd be sitting here over a year on in a still very similar position to this time last year, with the vast majority of the industry closed, and indeed still a lot of uncertainty about when the industry will be able to trade at a viable level again. Yes, we've got our indicative reopening dates, but we still don't quite know when we're going to viably trade. I think the first thing I want to do is congratulate you all for making it through the last year. It's been hugely traumatic and trying, not just in our businesses, but also on each of us as well. Whether you've been dealing with the stress of trying to keep your business afloat, trying to manage and motivate your teams at a time of great uncertainty, or indeed if you've been on furlough, worried about your job and the future of the industry, I know it's been hugely trying, and believe me, I can relate to it. It's been a very trying time for ASVA as well. However, we have made it to this point, so well done to each and every one of you. What I would say is, I think I can say this with absolute certainty, our sector has proven itself to be incredibly resilient and adaptable over the last 12 months, far more so than many of us would have thought possible. And I think that really does stand us in good stead for the challenges that we are undoubtedly still going to face in the year ahead. Whilst things are still definitely going to be difficult for us all, I think we're in a far more promising position than we were this time last year, of course. The fact that the vaccine rollout across Scotland and the rest of the UK has proven to be as successful as it has, it means that we can definitely finally look forward to opening. I think we can be confident we are opening now, and hopefully we will be able to open at an economically sustainable level again soon. I don't think I need to tell anyone here about the reopening timetable for the country. I think everyone will be fully au fait with it. We have the still indicative, it has to be said, reopening date of the 26th of April for much of the sector, and that is of course very much welcomed. Even more welcome is the news of the very strict travel restrictions that made viable trading at the majority of attractions impossible last year have been loosened, which is really, really important. From speaking to ASVA members since the timetable was published, there are definitely more notes of optimism about the path forward. And listen, I know we've discussed green shoots and light at the end of the tunnel before, of course, but there does definitely now appear to be a clearer pathway out of the crisis for many of us. Of course, there are still huge challenges for the sector, and that's where we're focusing our attention on the moment to help the sector get back on its feet. For example, 2-metre physical distancing restrictions remain a huge concern for much of the sector. And our most recent survey that we conducted with our partners at the Moffat Centre, only 15% of attractions stated that reopening at 2-metre distancing would have no impact on their ability to operate at an economically sustainable level. On top of that, continuing restrictions on international visitors are also going to present challenges. Again, referring to our survey, almost 20% of attractions anticipated a drop in turnover of more than 50% when compared to 2019 if we don't see any significant return of international travel. And I don't think we can say with confidence that we're going to see a significant return of international travel in 2021. So whilst we have got some light at the end of the tunnel, we know it is going to be a difficult time for the industry. And ASVA continues to lobby the Scottish Government, even through this purdah period that the government is in just now, to ensure that our industry is supported sufficiently to allow us to lead the recovery. I've got a direct line into the senior officials within the Scottish Government, including those who are creating the guidelines for the reopening of the industry, which still haven't been published yet. We're still waiting for those guidelines. And we're pushing to ensure that the needs of our sector are fully recognised. We've made it very clear to the Scottish Government, and to be fair, they've recognised that our sector is going to be crucial to the recovery of Scottish tourism. It's the see and do experiences, those businesses that look after our heritage, our culture, our landscapes, that drive the footfall and stimulate the expenditure in the wider tourism economy. We've consistently been making the case to the Scottish Government that securing the future of our sector, the attraction sector, goes a hell of a long way to securing the future of tourism in general in Scotland. And I think that is becoming more obvious to the Scottish Government. We know that we need to ensure that the industry is not just able to open, of course, but has to be able to open at a viable level. If we are still going to be subjected to prohibitive restrictions, there is absolutely no doubt we're going to need ongoing financial support to help us through to where we can trade at a viable level. To give you a quick update on the conversations that I'm having just now with the Scottish Government, I'll focus on the two major areas where the lobbying really does continue and continue at pace just now as well. First one is the physical distancing restrictions, which are a critical issue for many attractions. As per the latest ASVA survey that I mentioned, the continuation of 2 metre physical distancing will have economic consequences for 85% of the sector. Indeed, just under 10% of attractions have stated that they're not going to reopen if 2 metre physical distancing is maintained. And 45% have stated that whilst they do intend to reopen, they will either be losing money or at best they'll be covering the costs with no opportunity to make money, build reserves and pay off debts. So we have called and continue to call on the Scottish Government to allow attractions to operate with 1 metre physical distancing restrictions. This is the dispensation that's been given to the hospitality sector last year, and indeed it's been granted to hospitality again this year. Indeed, we've got the strange situation at the moment that most of you will be familiar with, where when you open an attraction with a cafe, we'll be able to have 1 metre distancing in the cafe. So you'll be able to have visitors sitting 1 metre apart from each other with face masks off with a significant dwell time, but visitors elsewhere in your attraction will need to be 2 metres apart, even though they've got face masks on, and there isn't significant dwell time. We don't think that makes any sense whatsoever, and we firmly believe that 1 metre distancing can be successfully managed in visitor attractions. We've put forward what we feel are very sensible proposals to allow the sector to operate at 1 metre distancing with suitable mitigating measures in place, things like time ticketing, for example. And we're endeavouring to get in front of Jason Leach and the Scottish Government clinicians to further make this case. We think it's not only unfair, we genuinely believe it doesn't make sense for 1 metre distancing to be acceptable in a cafe, a bar, or a restaurant, but not acceptable in a museum, on a tour, or even wandering around a garden, for example. Right now, you still have to be 2 metres there. If, however, 2 metre distancing is here to stay, for the long term anyway, and depending on the other restrictions in place post-lockdown, it is highly likely, like I said, that we're going to need ongoing targeted financial assistance, considerably above and beyond the restart grants announced last month. It's going to be needed if we're not going to see further, possibly irreversible damage to the sector. What we've been making clear to the Scottish Government is that, firstly, we're a seasonal industry. We've already lost a significant part of the main season by the time that we reopen. Easter will be gone, for example. Coupled with the fact that there was no season at all last year, we've made it clear that finances within the sector are completely exhausted just now. It also can't be expected that we're going to see a full recovery this year, as the potential restrictions on international travel and physical distancing that I mentioned are definitely going to prevent attractions from operating at normal levels. We've also made it clear that our sector has very high fixed costs, higher fixed costs than most other sectors within tourism. Even small attractions, and you all know this, have monthly costs of considerably over £10,000 a month. And for the big boys, that rises up to close to £500,000 a month. So there are growing issues about the levels of debt that attractions are having to take on board. Every day that one of our attractions cannot operate at an economically viable level, they're racking up more debt. And from recent research that we've done, for many, it's going to take more than 15 years to pay off the debt that's been accumulated and continues to be accumulated. So this absolutely puts the future of the industry in jeopardy, as there's a real risk that future investment programmes are not going to take place, and we're not going to be able to meet our collective ambition for Scotland to be a world leader in 21st century tourism. So depending on what reopening is going to look like, we firmly believe that the Scottish Government must look at further targeted financial support. And that has to be grants, by the way, not loans, for those businesses that are unable to trade at a viable level while the restrictions are in place. So whilst the restart grants of up to 19,500 are, of course, they are welcome. We did welcome them. We know that they are wholly insufficient to support the industry through to the full recovery, whenever that full recovery might be, because we do not yet know when we're going to be able to have the conditions in place to allow for a full recovery. A few weeks as the industry looks towards reopening, and most of the attractions I've spoken to are excited about reopening again. We're under absolutely no illusions that there's a lot of challenges ahead, and we continue to make the case for our sector. Laurie, I don't really want to talk for much longer because I want to hear from the guys here today. So I'll hand back to you, because it's not so much about me speaking, it's about you guys sharing your thoughts about the challenges. What I would say is please be assured that ASVA does continue to push both the Scottish and UK governments to support our sector more fully during this period. It's what I do every single day just now, is have these conversations and try and push for either a loosening of the restrictions in a safe way, or for more financial support for the industry. So thanks for taking the time to listen to me babble on for a few minutes. And Laurie, I'll hand back to you. Thanks.
Gordon, that was really, I mean, I don't know where to start with that. There was so much in that that's worthy of picking up, but it's for everybody else in the room to I guess, quiz. I had a couple of things that, do you think the 2 meters distance, so I wonder that my sense of it is they're kind of slavishly stuck to that, and they've kind of stuck their flag to the mast, and it's going to be an embarrassing climb down if they change it. Do you get the sense that that's where they are on it, or do they have an open mind?
It's where they are on it in the short term. That's right. What I can tell you. I'm now 100% sure we're not going to see any shift in this before the 26th of April. Right, we are going to be facing 2 meter physical distancing up to then, but I get the sense that we could then see movement on it happen reasonably fast after this. Where I would agree, Laura, where I found it really difficult is that I keep getting told that they're following the science, here, but as I said, we put forward really sensible proposals for 1 meter distancing to be introduced, and we have challenged the government on why it's safe to sit in a cafe. And listen, we don't want cafes to go to 2 meter. That's absolutely not the case. We think it is safe to sit in a cafe at 1 meter. But if it is safe to sit in a cafe at 1 meter, it is absolutely safe to have people 1 meter where there's less dwell time in a visitor attraction. What I will say is the Scottish Government tourism team, and indeed the Minister, Fergus Ewing, really does support it. He does want to see 1 meter distancing. He understands the financial implications if we don't get there. And the fact is, if we don't get it, listen, the Scottish Government and UK Government, they're going to have to keep putting money in their pocket. That's what's going to happen, So I do think that we might see movement reasonably fast. The big thing I'm trying to do just now, though, I need to get in front again of Jason Leach and his guys, because they really do have a significant amount of influence on the First Minister. Yeah. And so whilst I can make the case to Fergus Ewing and to the tourism officials, that gets completely knocked out the park if Jason Leach comes on and says it's not safe.
Yes.
So I need to sit down with him and say, and I'm not looking to be comparative with him. The last time I spoke to him, I said, look, let's discuss the mitigating measures, because I'm quite sure everyone around this table would agree that if they say, right, you have to have time ticketing, for example, to operate at 1 meter, fine,
fine,
we'll do time ticketing, So I'm really just looking to take those conversations forward. But like I said, I'm becoming, whilst I'm deeply frustrated, and hopefully that's coming across that I'm deeply frustrated. By the same token, I'm becoming more confident that we will see a change in it. But it just, what I worry about is it won't happen until we are well into the summer season. That's my worry. They might turn around and say we're going to wait until every single Scottish adult has been vaccinated, for example, before we do it. And I really think it needs to happen before then, because the sector's still on its knees financially, and we need to get this big barrier out the way. And so I'm hoping I'll get listened to on it.
So in our virtual room today, we have a number of our distillery partners, and those distilleries are all very different. So one would presume, and this is over at you guys, you're all, I mean, I know you've been preparing because we've been chatting to lots of you about it, but how hard is it for you to get yourselves together in a way that is viable? And as Gordon rightly says, if it's 2 meters to start with, and then in August it becomes 1 meter, then that's another review of your operating procedures, which, halfway through the year, you have to change everything again. I mean, how are you guys finding it, distillery chaps and chapesses? And you can all speak, it's okay, because you're in charge today. There's Anna. Hi, Anna.
Hello.
You're Glen Grant, yes?
Yeah, Glen Grant. Yeah. Well, if it's 2 meters, this year I don't think we can carry on tours because the layout of the distillery. So far we are not touring. So we're reopening the shop, soft opening, and then after that we'll see what happens in May with hospitality, and we could reopen the gardens. So far, as I said, soft opening. 2 meters.
That's what. Yeah, I've picked that up from a lot of the distilleries, and saying the same thing, that in terms of conducting tours, it's just not viable. It's just not viable to do it. So it's not going to happen in the immediate term, and a lot are just doing similar to you, opening up their shops. And I fed that back to the, because this is the other element of things that I'm feeding back to the Scottish government. We're also talking about the importance of our sector leading the recovery. And if things aren't open, we're not going to be leading the recovery. And also, we're also talking about responsible tourism as well, and visitor management. If you don't want visitors flocking to areas where they are misbehaving, let attractions open where it's managed environments, and then people can come there and have toilets, clean toilets, have controlled visitor flow, things like that. So we continue to really push those points, and we're hopeful that we're being listened to, and we've got the support, I should say, as well. We do have the support of the STA and the Scottish Tourism Alliance as well, who are a bigger voice than ASVA. I'm not going to lie to you, they are a bigger voice than we are. And Mark Crothall, the CEO, sits on the Scottish Tourism Emergency Response Group as the key leader of the industry, and he's totally behind us on this one. But like I said, it's getting in front of the clinical guys first and foremost. That's what I really need to do. The other thing I was going to mention, just for the distillery guys as well, the other argument that we're having, not argument, I don't like to say argument, the other area where we're working on behalf of the sector, and we've been working with the likes of Diageo and the Scotch Whisky Experience in this, is to allow samples to be given as part of tours as well, because that obviously wasn't allowed last year, which I just thought was insane, absolutely insane. That it was under the same rules of alcohol consumption as inside pubs, and of course a sample is not the same as drinking a pint of lager or 5 pints of lager. So we put forward again. I worked quite closely with Barbara Smith at Diageo and Susan Morrison at the Scotch Whisky Experience to put forward really, really sensible proposals to allow for samples to be consumed as part of tours. And I do know, having spoken to the Scottish Government guys that are creating the guidelines, that they think they are going to be able to allow that to happen. But I've still to get confirmation. The confirmation.
And there is absolutely.
We are kind of thinking how to do tastings outside on a courtyard we've got outside the visitor center. But still, before the government says anything, we are not hoping to do that until May, mid-May or end of May.
Yeah. We'll
see.
Yeah.
I mean, there's literally no sense at all in the samples restriction. And I mean, I couldn't believe last year I had to second, do double take, and you're like, no, that can't be right. And I thought, oh my God. So what's the point then?
Yeah, I'll be honest with you. From my experience of working quite closely with the guys that produced the guidance, they were, the only way I can put it, and this is where I'm hoping for something different this year, they were just reacting. Do you know what I mean, Laurie? They were creating guidance and then pushing it out without testing it, without road testing it in any way, shape or form. And therefore these things kept on cropping up. There was loads of cases, loads of instances where it was like, well, that doesn't make sense, that doesn't make sense. And they then couldn't change it. They then couldn't change the guidance. Whereas now we've had this period again of lockdown, and I'm really confident, genuinely confident, that some of the nonsensical parts of it have been reviewed, and that one of them is those the samples, which I'm very confident they're going to allow to take place.
And it does sound and does look as though they are the government are genuinely in consultation with the sectors this time. You know, so we we had with Fiona from the self caterers yesterday, and you know, as we discussed earlier, you know, Fiona's a bit of a machine and she won't let them off with anything. So it does sound like they're listening, but equally, I guess, a little bit like whack-a-mole last year. So they would, in terms of the funding, you know, they changed something here to address this particular issue, not recognizing that over this side, it's caused another problem that they hadn't thought about.
Yeah, and I'll also come back to what I said earlier. Yes, they are. I have virtually daily engagement, genuinely virtually daily engagement with Scottish Government officials, two-way engagement. They come to me, ask a lot of questions. I go back to them, asking a lot of questions. But it's not always the right people that I'm getting in front of. Like I said, I can get the tourism team guys. You know, I can get the tourism minister to agree to something and say, "Yep, absolutely, I agree that we should be allowing samples to be consumed within a distillery." The clinicians then turn around and say, "No, we don't agree with that," and it doesn't happen. So it's about, we need all the departments of the Scottish Government to work together as well. That's the other side of things. And Fiona will have had the same frustrations as me. You know, you think you've got somewhere, and then it gets ripped away from you at the last minute.
Yes.
Yeah.
So I think what's not often mentioned in this context is, or rather from my perspective, it does rather feel like the focus is on consumers returning to visitor attractions as a unit. Fine, but there doesn't seem to be a discussion about the impact of this restriction and of the restrictions on the actual travel trade element of the visitor attractions market. So, you know, we are in the heart of malt whiskey country. I'm looking at, you know, a dozen, 10 operators who regularly have groups and travel trade contacts and relationships they've built up over years. Do you think the government has an appreciation of the sort of second level damage of the inbound market and the travel trade and the B2B segment?
Yes, the tourism guys do. Laurie. You know, there is no doubt that they might not have had that at the beginning of the pandemic, right? I'll be honest with you. I'm not sure they did, but you can be damn certain that they do now. You know, the amount of dialogue that there's been with not just with ourselves, you know, with the likes of UK Inbound, for example. You know, there's been a huge amount of dialogue there, and they definitely do understand. But again, that doesn't translate into action.
Yeah.
The only way I can put this is that the Scottish Government have got a very clear safety first view of things, which, listen, I think all of us support, right, by the way. I think we all want things to be done safely, but where we struggle is not struggle, where we are keen to engage with the Scottish Government is on, well, we think we've got mitigating measures here. This is the point. We think we've got really good mitigating measures in place. And also, I think that it still stands to this day. There has not been one case of COVID-19 linked to a visitor attraction anywhere in the UK. Never mind Scotland. No. Anywhere in the UK.
Exactly. So, and not one case of COVID linked to a self-catering.
No.
Anywhere in Scotland either.
Yeah.
So where are they?
And listen, if you look at the consumer research shows that the most recent stuff was done by, well, there's loads of insights out there. There's 56 off stuff, and then also there's the stuff by BVA, BDRC, and Decision House for visitor attractions as well. If you've seen that research, if not, it's all on the ASVA website. And the consumers in Scotland, the most recent research, we're putting this out in today's e-newsletter to our members. Consumers in Scotland are very safety conscious. I think it is probably because of the messaging from the Scottish Government. The Scottish people in particular really want to see, so they do still want to see things like distancing measures, for example, but they haven't specified. They haven't said, well, it has to be 2 meters apart. What they want to see is that first, the visitor attractions are not mobbed. Right? That's fair enough. They want to, so that's where time ticketing comes in. They want to see that there's staff there, and the staff are there assisting the visitors. Listen, that's something we do anyway.
Exactly.
That's what our sector is great at. You know, that's where we're much better than supermarkets, for example. It's where we're much better than pubs. Yes. You know, and they want to see cleaning protocols as well. So, and by that, really, I don't think any visitor truly understands what your cleaning protocols are. All they want to see is there's people out there polishing things and wiping things. That's it. And again, it's something that we demonstrated last year in abundance. We really did. So we are really, really sure, very sure, that a move to 1 metre for our sector would not be something that would cause consternation with visitors. In fact, they wouldn't even notice it, really, to be honest with you. We'd be carrying on as normal, effectively, except we'd be allowed to have more visitors in, but it would still be at a very safe level, no doubts about it.
So today I had a question from one of our businesses around the contact checking and tracing app. So we use our own version of a check and protect app, which is the same one they use over in Cairngorms and Inverness, etc. So the government have just brought their own one out a few months ago. We'll presume that we are in favour of whatever kind of contact tracking app there is, that destinations and visitor attractions should use it where they can, whether it's our one for our area or the government one, which is connected into their Tracy thing.
Yeah, absolutely. If for no other reason, again, Laurie, well, one, it's complying with the regulations from the Scottish Government, but also it's a visitor reassurance tool. Yeah. It genuinely is. It really does help the visitor. It makes them believe that they're visiting a safe environment, and they are visiting a safe environment. So yeah, it doesn't matter which one it is at all. Yeah. Yeah.
I know that our one has been we've had 200,000 check-ins on our one over the past period. And certainly expected to be well used again this time. So hopefully that will be something that gives people that little bit of measure of assurance and certainty. I'm looking at Jill. So not just because she's underneath you on my screen, Gordon, but how, Jill, are you approaching the whole reopening?
No, we haven't set an actual reopening date yet. But I'm glad you brought up the point about the inbound travel trade, because I've noticed that since the announcements were made, the feedback I'm getting from prospective visitors, domestic and international, particularly international, is they've got this date of the 26th of April fixed in their heads, and they think the whole of Scotland is all going to be right back to normal again. So I've got coach bookings, and which I'm taking tentatively for months like June, for example. Now, I mean, we've explored the limitations of social distancing. I mean, that's obviously a big one, and that's not going to go away anytime soon. My problem is the timely deliverance of the information, because, for example, if I am allowed to open on the 26th of April, under what parameters is that going to be? I mean, am I going to allow cross-border visitors? Is there going to be local area restrictions again? International visitors, when do we get that information? Because it goes back again to what Gordon says, we have to open under a viable level of operation, and we need to know which visitors we can accept to determine that.
Yeah, I think that's one of the biggest frustrations that still exists, Jill. And listen, it's lovely to actually speak to you properly face to face. We've obviously had loads of, and I want to say that the information that you provided me over the last year, Jill, it's been unbelievably useful in my lobbying. It really has. So thank you very much indeed. But that point about the timeliness, we were reassured by the Scottish Government early in this lockdown that they wouldn't be repeating what they did with the last lockdown and be releasing guidance 5 days before you're due to reopen, or 5 days before. They wouldn't be making decisions that would then be, right, these decisions that come into force next week. But unfortunately, you know, the next, as Laurie said, the next announcement that we're going to get is the 20th. And that is probably when we're going to get the guidance for reopening.
I think so.
On the 20th.
Because they had been promising it a week past, 10 days past, hadn't they? And it just keeps getting tipped in the long grass.
Well, listen, I happen to know the guy that writes the guidance is on holiday just now. So we're not going to see it.
I hope it's a
I hope that's not an overseas trip.
Indeed, yeah. Listen, I'm still feeding that back to you, and the point you made is incredibly relevant. That we need much more lead time, and we need to understand. We've asked about the cross-border travel. We still don't know whether that's going to be taking place on the 26th or not. We've no idea, and we're not being given an indication. The line is a very woolly line on it, just saying, "Oh, we're going to review it, and it's either going to happen the 26th or sometime after."
Mm-hmm.
Well, of course, it's going to happen either on the 26th or sometime after. That's, we know that, but we need to know exactly when. And with international travel, listen, I get the international travel things is a more difficult one to be able to predict. But however, we need clearer guidance than what we've got at the moment. And yeah, otherwise for businesses like yours, you're right, you're kind of just stuck in limbo at the moment, which is no use. And again, I keep coming back to this point. We are saying you need attractions to be open to stimulate the economy. You absolutely do. So if we don't know if we can open, like I said, we've actually got a survey out just now. Hopefully you filled it in, Jill, actually, about when you're anticipating reopening, and we're going to feed all that information back into the Scottish Government, but also to Visit Scotland too, because Visit Scotland are really keen to understand in terms of their own marketing activity what's opening and when it's opening. But I think a lot of people are in for a surprise. I think same as last year, people seem to think that we'll give you the date of the 26th of April, or as it was last year, the 15th of July, and that just means you're all going to open up. That isn't what happened last year, and it's not what's going to happen this year either.
Hi, it's just Lindsay from Glenlivet. Just on that, Jill obviously mentioned about people kind of getting in touch about like coach parties and things like that. We've obviously got like a lot of the distilleries, we've got online bookings, and we are starting to see people coming in asking about September, October, and just the other day we even got a request for 20 people. But it's a case of, at the moment, it's quite difficult for us to kind of gauge what's happening, because obviously in England they're being told one thing from the government, that in July all restrictions will be lifted completely. So we're obviously talking about social distancing still probably being around for quite some time, but we obviously don't know what is quite some time, because the English government are saying all restrictions will be lifted, but obviously the Scottish government, we don't have an end date to that. So that's something that we're kind of finding quite difficult at the moment, is we're obviously having to limit what we're offering, that we can only offer to maybe a group of 6 maximum, because we can't open the bookings to more than that in case a party of say 12 books in, but we have different restrictions in comparison to England, and that is something that I think we're kind of finding difficult to kind of approach at the moment, in the fact that there's 2 things being said. So we're having to deal with guests requesting on the basis that they think, as you say, everything's going to be lifted, whereas we don't have that.
Yeah, I mean, I don't have an answer to that, Lindsay, other than I completely sympathise with what you're saying. And again, you'll know yourself that the initial idea was there's going to be a 4 nations approach to this, and there is not a 4 nations approach to this. There's a very different approach particularly between Scotland, between England and the rest of the home nations. So I'll feed this back. I'll talk about the challenges that the sector has, and I think you're right with the people will be expecting to book. That's it. Because someone in England's not necessarily paying attention to what the restrictions are in Scotland. And so they're expecting that it would be the same. So what I will say, and I don't want to get political about it, but I think there's a deliberate differentiation between what's happening in Scotland and what's happening in England, I don't think that's
in any way.
I'm not here to say who's right and who's wrong.
I don't think that's in any way political, Gordon. I think that's an obvious fact. I think the dogs in the street can now see that. That they're making a point of being different to make a point of being different, which does seem rather counterproductive sometimes.
Yeah, I mean, all that we can do, and what I'm doing is I'm feeding back to the Scottish Government the damage that's being done just now in terms of things like forward bookings are I'm sure Fiona will have spoken about it yesterday in the call, Laurie, that if you've got cast iron guarantees, now listen, they don't actually have cast iron guarantees, by the way, in England. They don't. But however, if you've got a much bigger reassurance that you're able to go and visit somewhere in Cornwall, and you don't know if you can visit somewhere in Scotland, where are you going to book? Yeah.
we had exactly that discussion. You know, if the English know they can book as far up as, you know, the Lake District, then that's, if they want to come to Scotland but they can't get to Scotland, well, the next nearest thing is the Lake District. So that's where they'll go. So then by the time it goes around the circle, there's no one left to come here.
Yeah. And
we'll have a summer filled with staycationers who are deferred from last year, so there'll be no new money. And potentially low spending UK visitors who stand outside the visitor centre but don't go in. Yeah. You know, stand in the car park and point at it, and then go to Tesco and buy scotch. You know, that's the doomsday scenario for us.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting that, I mean, having spoken to the UK government as well, or officials in the UK government, the officials are far less confident about the speed of reopening than the government is, and you know, the Conservative government is quite bullish about it, and the officials are a bit, when you talk to them and you talk about opening dates and things like that, they're like, ooh, international travel, ooh, don't know. Whereas the government obviously are a bit more, we're going to do this, and it's going to be all systems go once everyone's vaccinated. Remains to be seen. And
I think even as recently as this morning, they've said something in the order of that, haven't they? The UK government, they've been quite overt about, well, everything will be fine. Don't worry, it's all going to be open.
Yeah, I mean, I understand the messaging. I understand the reason for the messaging, but they could find the egg in their face if it doesn't go to plan. You know, that's the one thing.
Good grief. So you also talked of ongoing support, and my apologies for not remembering, when does the furlough scheme officially end?
Furlough's up till September.
Right. Okay.
And I don't see that being extended.
Yeah.
If it just kind of comes back to what I just said with the UK government saying that everything will be open again. If they say that everything will be open again, if it is going by that timeline, they absolutely would not continue furlough for us if we're going slower. Exactly. Definitely not. Yeah, the Scottish government previously have said, I spoke to the Finance Secretary Kate Forbes about this, and she said they would look at an alternative to furlough in Scotland if it was needed. But where that money would come from, I'm not 100% sure, and she herself wasn't 100% sure. So, but I think we can say with pretty much certainty that unless things do slow up in England, then we won't see an extension of furlough beyond September. So
my brain was going to, okay, so I am any of my distillery visitor centres, my distillery partners here, and I have staff who are on furlough, and if I know if I'm being told I can reopen, then I've got to bring those guys back, and I've got to retrain them, and I've got to protocol them, and they have to get ready with all the new SOPs, and then we close again, or goodness me. It doesn't bear thinking about, you guys, does it? I mean, it must just be awful. And the sadness for you, Anna, is that you can't even open the bloody garden. One of the most beautiful gardens in our region, outside, fantastic, historic, and you can't even. So
well, we cannot. We need to think about it, because the fact is that the visitors, they need to come through the shop.
Yeah.
And if we need 2 meters apart, so people coming back and in the gardens, they are 2 different doors, so we don't know how many people would be allowed inside. So we need people on the other door, on the main reception, people on the conservatory. So we are trying to organize how to work out, but with 2 meters apart, it won't work.
Mm-hmm.
So
gosh,
it's actually, retail is another question that I've asked to the Scottish government, because obviously that was reduced to 1 meter last year and then pushed back up to 2 meters. So I've asked whether come 26, whether it's going to be 2 meter or 1 meter in retail. The indication I've been given, it's going to be staying at 2 meter for at least the time being.
I will say fingers crossed.
And now Lynn, who is at the top of my screen here, and I were in some back and forth earlier this week. Lynn, and you were talking about just not really knowing how, what, where, when, and if, really, weren't you? That for you guys, it's just so terribly difficult to plan. You're in the old muted. You're muted there, my love. First one. There you are, that's better.
Yeah,
yeah,
sorry.
Yeah. No, it's okay. I do it all the time.
I've had a wee problem with this afternoon. Yes, we're in a very similar situation as to some of the larger organisations I've heard about this afternoon, and we're obviously much smaller in scale, and we are completely volunteer run and led. Therefore, a lot of our volunteers, as a result of that, are in the vulnerable age group. Therefore, we cannot make any assumptions that we're going to have all our volunteers piling back through the doors, whether they've had their second vaccination or not. We face the same sort of problems. We're going to have to adapt. We're going to have to change just about everything that we do. What Gordon's been saying has really hit home about the 2-metre distancing. This is going to be a disaster for somewhere like Moravia, which is not a very large floor space. Therefore, we're going to be very limited in the number of people we're going to have through our centre when we do open up in any one day. So the economic impact of that, we're going to have to look at very carefully. We've actually been closed to the public since October 2019, when we closed for our season then. Our season runs from March to October. Therefore, we've had no income apart from grants that we've applied for since October 2019. I know there'll be lots of other people in that situation as well. So we are desperate to get up and get going again, but it's just the uncertainty, it's the lack of clarification of the rules from the Scottish Government that's at the moment we're very unsure about. And as I said before about the volunteer issue as well, we've got to be sort of doubly careful about our volunteers coming back.
Yeah, I mean, we fed that back in as well, and about the amount of visitor attractions that rely on volunteer workforce and the age group that volunteer workforce is. We certainly saw that in 2020 when a third of the sector didn't reopen last year at all, and it wasn't just about economic viability. It was also things like the volunteer workforce being unwilling to come, understandably, but unwilling to come back into front of house roles in particular, when it was regarded as potentially being unsafe. I don't know what your feeling is, Lynn, with whether the vaccine plays a part now in that, and maybe encouraging more volunteers to return to the workforce or not.
I suspect it will. I mean, we're at the stage here, Gordon, where people are just getting their second vaccinations now. So yes, I think people will have a certain amount of confidence in the fact that the rollout has been relatively quick for people in that group. I think the onus upon us as directors at Moravia, though, we're going to have to make sure that it's very obvious and very plain to everyone that we are totally compliant with all the protocols. Now, I'm thinking about that in terms of the type of centre we have. We're an aerospace science and technology centre. A lot of our exhibits are outdoors, which in first hearing you think brilliant, because you can have people outdoors, it's going to be safer with a restricted space. However, we pride ourselves in the fact that our visitors can climb aboard all our cockpits and aboard all our airplanes. Now, this is going to be a huge issue for us. First of all, do we allow our visitors to climb aboard? If we do, we have to clean and sanitize every time somebody gets on board a cockpit. Therefore, that's another issue that's going to reduce the number of visitors that we can have in it at any one time. So this is quite an issue for us, really. Are we going to have to open up, but the visitor experience that we are giving our customers is going to be decreased? But in our case, we think it will be, because all they'll be able to do is initially walk around and look from the outside. They won't be able to actually interact with any of our exhibits outside, which, as I say, is a huge issue for us.
Yeah, I wish I had something more positive to say in that front, Lynn, but I think you're actually right with that. I think that you know, from a visitor perspective, unless you are literally wiping everything down after someone has gone into one of those cockpits, there will be an expectation, therefore, that they won't be able to climb up and go in these things, because I even think from a consumer perspective, you'd probably be saying, actually, I'm not going to do that. They've just been up there. They've just been touching that. I'm not going to bother doing that. So I think you are going to probably have to review the experience. I wish I had a better answer than that, but I don't.
No, that's something that we're talking around. We haven't set a reopening date yet. Our first job will be to get our engineering volunteers back on site, make it safe for them, and then think about a reopening date with perhaps 1 day a week as a trial opening and invite members along. That's the sort of line we're at the moment. We haven't set a date yet, though, for reopening.
And I totally feel your pain on the capacity issue as well. I was having a conversation just yesterday with one of our members, National Wallace Monument, and if anyone's visited there before, you can imagine the challenges that they're going to face with the physical distancing. Their capacity is going to be under 10% of what it normally is. So they are going to open because they are now owned by the council. Or they're in the process of being taken over by the council. But if they were a purely commercial organisation, there's absolutely no way they'd be opening.
I feel that for an organisation like Moray, I think we have to open this year. Whatever experience we're going to offer, we have to, because for a visitor attraction to be closed for 2 consecutive seasons, I think the message there is, well,
it's shut. Yeah, exactly.
They're not really trying very hard, etc. So I think we have to, but it's the process that we have got to go through to get there, to make it safe. Whether it's going to be financially viable for us this year, who knows? It's very encouraging, though, to hear that you're still lobbying for further support.
We firmly believe, Lynn, that the answer doesn't just come with reduction of physical distancing. Our sector is going to need continued support for 2021. There's absolutely no doubt about it. And we like I said, we were quite successful last year with some of our lobbying activity for the funding support. The question is going to come down to money, and it's going to come down to where the money comes from. The latest conversation I had with the Scottish Government, and this was just before the election period started, was that there would be no further funding before the beginning of June. That's the next time we're going to see any potential further funding for the sector, and that's purely because the elections are happening, and then it will take about a month beyond that for any decisions to be made. But believe me, one thing the Scottish Government definitely do understand, and who knows what Scottish Government we've got coming back in, but it's likely to be something similar to what we've got just now. They absolutely understand the importance of attractions to the tourism economy, and so they recognise that they need to provide support, particularly for areas where the attractions are the main driver to the tourism proposition. Then they need to provide the financial support that's required. And believe me, Lynn, every day I'm beating that drum, every single day. And we're at the top table for that one, I can tell you. We're at the top of the list for getting support.
Very good. All right. Thanks, Gordon.
I think we're approaching the end of our appointed hour. I think, Gordon, you are a hero, and I think it is hard for us to see the work that you've done on a daily basis. I think we probably see 10% of it, but you have worked so hard.
Just look at the grey hair. That's how you can see it.
You had that before. I know that. I think you've done an amazing job. And actually, I'll tell you, and I won't say which visitor attraction it was, but I spoke to someone here about 10 days ago who got £25,000. And they got that directly as a result of you. So, they mentioned you by name, they mentioned ASVA. They're not members, but they attribute their money to your communications and your advice. So, that is great. And the sad thing for us, and Jill is a director of Moray Speyside, the sad thing for us is that our first year has not been spent building on 6 years of record tourism. Mm-hmm. And that our next 5 years will be spent trying to get back to where we got to 10 years ago. So this is a completely different conundrum for all of us now. And I think it probably needs us all to work in a completely different way. And hopefully collaboratively. The big message for me is together, if we all push in the same direction with one voice. And I guess that's the benefit of a membership organization, is it not? Mm-hmm. That the value of whether it's Moray Speyside or in fact sector groups like yourselves and the SSC and the others, those are the sector groups that have managed to effect change and get policy decisions changed and improved. If it weren't for you guys, that wouldn't have happened.
Well, listen, I appreciate those kind words, Laurie. And what I would say is collaboration is the most important thing. And that's why I was delighted to accept the invitation to come and speak to you today. And I'll do it anytime. I'm more than happy to come on to any of these calls, and I pick up as much from you guys as in fact probably more from you guys than I am able to give back to you. So listen, I greatly appreciate it, and believe me, we'll continue to fight tooth and nail for all businesses within the attraction sector.
Well, we're deeply grateful to you, my friend. I would just as a brief top and tail, our friends from 56 Degree Insight that Gordon mentioned will be with us next week, and they'll be going over the most recent output of the consumer survey, the Consumer Sentiment Index, which will tell us a little bit more about how the Scots are feeling. I would point you all also to our website on our COVID page for the most recent updates. And if you're not already using it, to protect.morayspeyside.com for the contact tracing patron details recording app, which is easy to use and completely free. So, Gordon, thank you.